My name's Aman. Today we're going to be talking about how the aging brain affects mind and motion. We'll have this kind of as a two-part series, so today I'll mostly be doing the talking. It's kind of background to set up Tahi's lecture next time, which will talk about kind of the cutting-edge research on brain diseases. Tahi, in fact, is already a doctor. He's a PhD with a background in neuroscience. So he's done a lot of research, and I think we're very lucky to have him be giving a lecture next week. But just to start off a little bit about ourselves, so you have a little bit of connection to us. I'm originally from Cleveland, Ohio. Moved to Madison when I was 4, actually at Fitchburg when I was 4. Grew up here, went to West High School, had my high school graduation party in this very room, and then ended up going to UW-Madison for undergraduate, majored in biomedical engineering, now of course in medical school. And on the right is a picture of me and my fiance. We got engaged just about 2 months ago. Thank you. I'll let Tahi introduce himself real quick.
Hi. Hello everyone, my name is Tahi. Just like Aman, I'm a third-year medical student. Prior to this, I was a little interested in how brain works, especially when it is hit by neurodegenerative disorders like Parkinson's disease and ischemic stroke. So I got into research, and I spent like 4.5 years doing some research at the Department of Neurological Surgery. So I'm just happy that I have the opportunity to share some of the research that I did in that department. And prior to that, I'm originally from South Korea. I got here in Madison when I was 19 for undergrad, and then I did a PhD here, and then I'm doing medical school. So I consider Madison as my second home. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
All right, so an overview of what we'll be talking today. Today's lecture will cover what is aging. It's often a tough thing to define, so we'll kind of cover that. We'll talk about normal aging of the body as well as the mind. A little bit about abnormal aging, though the bulk of that will be covered next week. And then we'll give some specific recommendations that are backed by official guidelines on how to stay healthy, including exercise, food, activities, etc. And then the thing we didn't advertise that we tried to put together for you guys is an organ demonstration. So right over there we have a bucket filled with about 8 or 9 real organs. You guys will have the opportunity, if you so desire, to actually touch them, ask questions about them, that sort of thing. If that's not something you're interested in, you can feel free to stay in the back or leave. But in my experience, people end up really liking that sort of thing. So I'm a big proponent of kind of interactive sessions. So throughout this presentation, you'll kind of see this red background slide with questions or thoughts kind of directed towards you. So before we get into my part, I kind of wanted to ask you guys what comes to mind when you hear the word aging. Any takers for that question? Please.
Over 65.
Okay. Okay. Anyone else? For the people who can hear that, the first answer was over 65. Second answer was loss of ability. All right. Well, so a lot of the times I think we have this misconception that aging is the loss of ability or a disease. But I would say that aging is not a disease, but rather a risk factor for disease. And we'll kind of get into the proof for that a little bit. But what aging is the natural progression of accumulation of changes over time that ultimately puts you at risk for disease or death. And the reason I word it that way is that the number, the age, is only part of the picture. A lot of it is how well you take care of yourself. You know, your genetics matter. If everyone in your family has passed by the age of 50, chances are you're kind of limited in the number you'll achieve in life. But how well you take care of yourself really matters. For example, look at these pictures here. The top row is the same people as the bottom row, before drug abuse on the top and after drug abuse on the bottom. If I had showed you these pictures independently and asked you on the top row how old you think those people are, I think you'd say, late 20s, early 30s maybe. And those same people, just a year or two later, you look on the bottom row, maybe late 40s, 50s, in some cases even older. Right, exactly. So the choices you make matter. And of course, this is an extreme example. Not everyone is going to become a drug addict. But beyond drugs, the other things matter too. Just kind of another thing. Here are two people, and I guess it's a pointed question, but if I had not given you this question of how old these people are, what would you have said for the person on the left and the person on the right?
70 and 90.
70 and 90. Anyone else? Good guess? All right. The person on the left is 86. He's a fellow in the UK who runs several marathons every year. The person on the right is 100. And clearly these people have taken really good care of themselves and made choices in life that have led to them being healthy. I mean, look at the guy on the left has muscles bigger than I do at his age. So when we think about factors of influence on the brain and on the body, in medicine we often like to think of something called the biopsychosocial model. I know that's a big word, so I'll break it down. What that basically means is a lot of things contribute to it. So a part of it is your biology, that's the bio part. So we talked about, disease. If everyone in your family has passed by the age of 50, your numbers might be limited. That's part of the biology. If you have some congenital disease, unfortunately your lifespan is going to be limited. That's a part of it. But an equal part of it, or I should say a significant part of it, is also the rest of your life. So society, how you interact with people, how happy you are, what choices you make. If you're going to make the choice to sit down and watch TV every day, 24 hours a day, and not go outside, go on a walk, it's going to limit your number. So we kind of like to take this holistic picture into what affects aging. Your genetics, your environment, your health and lifestyle choices, your psychology. I think that's an often understated part of it, psychology. If you're depressed and you're not able to make healthy lifestyle choices because you're in your own head and don't have the drive or motivation to be healthy, that's going to limit your number. There's really good data behind that. So beyond that, we kind of have to cover why aging makes us more susceptible to illness and death. I think that's something we all accept. As we get older, we get sicker and more prone to dying, but we often don't really understand why. And to cover that, we have to cover this concept of homeostenosis, which is the decrease in organ system reserves with age. Now what that means is if you're a 10-year-old child and you get pneumonia or you're sick, you have a certain number of reserves in your body that can be directed at regenerating your body, being healthy. As you get older, the number of the reserves decline, and also more of your reserves are in use at any given moment because you have accumulated over time more illnesses. Maybe you have a bad knee, maybe you have arthritis, maybe you have high blood pressure. Your reserves that are keeping you healthy are in more use as you get older. Therefore, any extra insult makes you more prone to illness and death. So the cartoon on the right over there kind of illustrates this. On the left, you see the little child. He can get sick and get back to his health relatively quickly. As you get older, more of your reserves are in use. So as you get sick, you kind of get to the cliff, the precipice as it's called, and you can get sick, hospitalized, pass away. Again, if at any point there are any questions during this, please just raise your hand. And like I said, the accumulation of problems as you get older also puts you at risk. So it's one thing if you just have weak bones, that if you fall, you would break a bone or something like that. It's another thing if you have weak bones and you have bad vision problems, so you can't see where you're walking, and you have neuropathy in your feet, so you can't feel how you're walking. What else did I put? And you have balance issues. All those things would put you more prone, make you more prone to actually falling and breaking a bone, whereas if you just had weak bones and everything else was healthy, you could maybe work around that a little bit. Another example of the same concept is cancer. So we often like to think of cancer as something that just happens, but in reality it is an accumulation of disease processes. So in medicine we often like to think of several different mutations that have to happen in your cells for cancer to occur. So there has to be one mutation where the cells grow faster than they're supposed to. But your body is smart. It has things in place, systems in place to prevent cells that are growing really fast from keep growing. They have systems to shut those down. But you get cancer when those systems also get mutated and don't work. And the only way that happens is if you age. You accumulate those mutations over time that make you more prone to having cancer. So now we'll kind of talk about the normal effects of aging on the body, and I'm sure many of these are familiar to you. Decreased muscle mass and increased fat. We like to think of the center of mass of the body kind of moving inwards. You lose the muscle, you gain the fat. You have decreased bone strength. After age 30, you lose 1% of your bone mass every year. So if you make it to 70, you've lost 40% of your maximum bone mass already. Decreased lung function, especially exacerbated by things like tobacco products if you do that sort of thing. Decreased heart function, decreased metabolism. So, the classic thing we talk about is, I used to be able to eat so much and not put on any weight, and now I can't do that. That's your metabolism at work. It's slowed down. You can't burn through the energy as quickly. Decreased neurogenesis, which is, brain processes. We'll get much more into that. And increased susceptibility to medication side effects, disease, etc. So we have a little video here. We'll see if it works. But another known side effect of aging is hearing loss. And let's see if this works.
We've gathered a group of volunteers ranging in ages from 8 to 71 and are putting them to the test in our first Battle of the Ages contest. All right, you guys, I'm gonna play a series of sounds, and if you can hear the sound, I want you all to raise your hands up. Your right hand, you're gonna keep it there, all right? For those of you watching at home, feel free to play along. Ready? 8,000 hertz. All right. All of you can hear that first frequency. Now I'm gonna play another sound at another frequency. If you still hear it, keep your hands up. If you can't, bring your hand down. 10,000 hertz. Okay, we seem to have lost our 60 and over crowd. You guys look great though. Let's raise the frequency even more. 14,000 hertz. Okay, we lost you. You're very fit, I can tell. 16,000 hertz. Okay, at 16,000 hertz, we've lost all of our grown-ups. But we still have our youngest members of the crowd with their hands up. Luke, tell everybody how old you are.
8.
8 years old. Your fresh ears still can pick up these faint frequencies.
I've been cleaning them.
Nice work. Now we're taking it up to 18,000 hertz. You guys ready? 18,000 hertz, we've lost 23 and 19. But the under 18 crowd is intact. 18,000 hertz, that's pretty impressive. Enjoy it while it lasts. So, how about you at home? Were you able to pick up that final tone? Or were you left listening to the sound of silence? Well, either way, you may have noticed a trend. As this chart shows, the higher the frequency, the younger you typically have to be to hear that sound. So why is that the case, and what does it have to do with your brain? To help answer that, here's Yale University's Brian Scholl.
Sounds out in the world are just vibrations in the air. But what we hear is determined by patterns of neurons firing in our brains. So the first step in hearing a sound is to somehow translate an air vibration into an electrical neural signal. This is done by microscopic hair cells in our ears. Different hair cells are activated by different frequencies of vibrations in the air. But as we age, these hair cells start to deteriorate so that we gradually lose the ability to hear these frequencies.
What? And who knows, your kids could be using a high-frequency ringtone.
I'll take that.
Without you even knowing it. So the first point in our Battle of the Ages goes to the younger brains. But this next game is going to come down to experience, so older brains should have the advantage.
Okay, so I think that kind of illustrated the point that aging is an accumulation of problems. You kind of lose those hair cells that are designed for higher frequency sounds as you age. Now I know what you're thinking, aging sucks, I don't want to get older, but there are things that get better with age. Certain types of memory, we'll cover this more, but semantic memory, which is your knowledge of the world and experience and facts and figures, which is why you guys could probably kick my butt in trivia. You have over time accumulated all this knowledge and it's still there. That's not really affected by aging. Your ability to recall it at any given moment may be diminished, but overall your accumulation of knowledge is still there. Your decision making gets better as you age. You have more experience. You've seen how the world works. You've seen how to tackle different problems from several different angles. That's something that I might not be as good at as you. And you're less impulsive, you know? You've made those mistakes in the past and you know not to make them now. Pattern recognition and problem solving is better. Again, you've seen different problems from various perspectives, various angles. There's good data showing empathy is better. You guys, on average, are probably a kinder group of people than people my age. self-confidence and self-esteem. You know what you're capable of. You know what you've accomplished. All those things tend to get better with age. So now an introduction to the brain as we kind of delve more into the brain side of things. Just some basic anatomy we have to cover. Now a lot of people kind of approach the brain from different angles when they explain it. I like to take a bottom-up approach. So if we start at the bottom, just for, I guess, orientation, we have a person looking this way, and it's just a cut through the brain that we're looking at. So the top is the top, that way is forward, that's the back of the brain. I like to take a bottom-up approach. The base of the brain is the very basic animal thing, the thing that every living being has. So down here, the brain stem, it covers breathing, heart rate, temperature, things that we absolutely could not live without. Then you have the cerebellum, which covers balance and coordination. Every living animal needs balance and coordination. Then as we get higher, we get into more advanced functions, let's say. So you have the temporal lobe in yellow, which covers hearing, learning, feelings. How you interact with people is affected by that. Then you have the occipital lobe, which is just sight. And then the top two, so in red we have the frontal lobe, really just the front part of your brain. That's the highest, most human of the brain functions. Thinking, memory, behavior, movement, things that allow us to do advanced problem solving, things that a dog or a cat may not be able to do, but we can. So you see this bottom-up approach from base animalistic functions to what makes us human. And then in blue we have the parietal lobe, which is language and touch, how we interact with the world. And then we cover physical changes in the brain with age. We'll kind of get to that a little bit more when we get to the live organ demonstration. But the brain does shrink in size with age. That's a known phenomenon. Weight of the brain decreases by 5% every decade after the age of 40. And the rate of decline tends to increase with age. So in this picture here, on the left we have an elderly brain, and on the right we have a younger brain. You can see some stark differences. Kind of the bumps and the grooves are wider in the older brain. There's less surface area. So the reason we have these bumps and grooves in the brain is to increase the surface area. It's kind of like you can take a paper, smooth piece of paper, and you crumple it up, you get the same mass in a smaller area. That's why the brain has those. That's why people use smooth brain as an insult sometimes. So we kind of lose those bumps and grooves as we get older. You also have slower brain conduction, which is caused by decreased myelin, which is kind of this protective protein for your neurons, your brain cells, as we get older. You have loss of synapses. So synapses are each of your brain cells branches out and connects to other brain cells. And the way it branches out are called dendrites. And you lose those as you get older. You have loss of plasticity, which is the ability of your brain to modify itself, to regenerate, that sort of thing. And here is an MRI of a young brain on the left and an old brain on the right. Some stark differences you can see. So just for orientation, black is like fluid or air. White is dense matter here, so like brain tissue. In the center of the brains, we kind of have these things called ventricles, which are normal pockets of fluid. They tend to get bigger with age just because the surrounding brain shrinks in size. So something has to fill the space in your skull. Your skull doesn't change in size. So in the older brain, if we look in the center, there's a bigger area of fluid compared to the younger brain. It's also a little hard to appreciate, but if you look on the bumps and grooves on the edges of the brain, they're bigger on the older brain, like we covered before. So now we'll kind of get into a little bit more about how those physical changes affect your thinking. So again, a question for you guys, what changes have you noticed in your own thinking as you've aged? Yep, okay, the answer was focus more on one thing at a time, can't multitask like you used to. Any other takers? Yes?
Sometimes can't quite think of the right word.
Can't.
Know it, but it doesn't come to mind.
Right, can't think of the right word. You know it, but it just doesn't come to mind. So now we'll talk about memory and how those changes change with age. So memory is kind of wishy-washy. People define it in different ways. People tend to divide different types of memories in different ages. Just for the purpose of this presentation, I've chose to take this school of thought, which is there are 4 types of memories: episodic, semantic, procedural, and working, and we'll cover each of those and how they change with age. So episodic memory is how memory is stored with mental tags. So how you code where, when, and how a piece of information was picked up. An example would be your memory of your first day of school. You probably remember a good deal about that because it's an important day, and you've made all these mental tags. This is where I was, this is what I wore, this is what I did. an important meeting you had last week, a lesson where you learned that Paris is the capital of France. Maybe you remember those things, maybe you don't. But all of this is very important in the recall of information. If you can remember how you learned a piece of information, it's easier to recall later. And this is less important in recognition of information. Now, if I gave you a multiple choice test on what is the capital of France, I'm sure most of you guys would get it, because you have that information stored. It's just a matter of how you recall it. So this sort of memory, this how you remember where you were and what you were doing when you were remembering a piece of information, that tends to decline from middle age onwards, so 40s, 50s, that tends to decline. Then there's semantic memory, which we kind of talked about before, knowing facts and figures, trivia, that sort of thing. So for example, knowing that 10 millimeters is a centimeter, knowing that Paris is the capital of France, not knowing where you learned it or how you learned it, but knowing the fact itself. This tends to increase gradually from middle age to the elderly. So even as you get older, you pick up more things and you know more things. Now the caveat here is it declines in the very elderly. What I mean by that is late 80s, 90s. That tends to decline. Then there's procedural memory, remembering how to do things, how to tie your shoe, how to ride a bike, cooking an omelet, cooking your favorite meal. That doesn't really tend to change with age. And then working memory, how many things you can juggle in your head at one time. And this is an interesting one. So this one is not affected by age, but the attention may be. So when we say, I can't multitask anymore, that's more a factor of attention than how many things you can keep in your mind at one point. So an example of this would be figuring out how to organize your day. You know you have to eat breakfast. You know you have a lunch date with your friend. You know you have to do these chores and shopping. And working memory is how you juggle those things and put them together to come up with a cohesive plan for the day. That doesn't really tend to change with age. Now, a word on compensation. Your brain is very smart. As things decline, it's not like you lose those things forever. Your brain adapts in certain ways. So while an older brain may be declined in some aspects, it can draw on the other areas that may be stronger to compensate, kind of. An example of this is Alzheimer's disease. We like to think of Alzheimer's disease as you can't remember anything. But really, the accumulations of problems you have in Alzheimer's disease come over time, and you only notice it kind of later in the disease process because the mind of these people adapts with time. It comes up with compensation methods. If they can't remember where they were, they can get to that information maybe in a loop. Oh, I don't know what I ate for breakfast. Oh, but I do remember that I saw there was this wrapper in the trash. Oh, I remember what the wrapper had on it. Therefore, I ate whatever the wrapper was for on breakfast, kind of these loops of information. And then a little bit more on normal aging of the brain. The speed of thinking, how fast you can think of something, come up with a piece of information. It does decline, like we've mentioned over here. Attention, like we said, tends to decline, less able to focus for extended periods of time. So that is all normal aging. That is not abnormal. Abnormal is something different. There are a couple of key factors for abnormal that we'll cover. The one that unfortunately is the most common is just decreases in cognition that are more than normal. Now that's a wishy-washy definition. It's hard to kind of really understand what that is, but it's just faster than you'd expect or worse than you'd expect. And it impacts your thinking abilities. You have reduced ability to solve common problems. Difficulty expressing oneself can also impact motor systems in certain cases like Parkinson's or something like that. But the key with abnormal aging of the brain is this bottom line: impairment of activities of daily living and instrumental activities of daily living. We'll talk about that a little bit more here. Activities of daily living are really things you cannot live without. Your ability to feed yourself, bathe yourself, be continent, hold your urine and your stool in, to move yourself from point A to point B, to dress yourself, that sort of thing. If that declines, then it's very, very, very likely that you have abnormal aging going on. Instrumental activities of daily living is a little bit different. It's kind of just a step up from that sort of thing. Using the telephone, shopping, preparing food, housekeeping, doing laundry, using transportation, handling medications, handling finances. If those tend to go, you're maybe on the route to having abnormal brain aging, or you have it already. It depends. So those are the kind of the red flag things to look out for. If you can't go shopping because your knee hurts and you can't walk, that's a different thing. If you can't go shopping because you'll get lost in the store and you won't be able to find your way home, or you don't remember how much money you spent and someone takes advantage of you, or that sort of thing, that's abnormal. Kind of a distinction there. So a very brief introduction to brain diseases here. We will cover a lot more on this next week with Dr. Kim here. He is an expert in this field, so I think we'll have a very good lecture next week. But the first, as you go from normal brain, maybe an elderly brain, but still normal, to an abnormal brain, the first step we have is something called mild cognitive impairment. This is by far the most common. And what it is minor decreases in cognition that others can notice. It is not enough to interfere with those ADLs, activities of daily living, and instrumental activities of daily living that we talked about. Then you have different types of dementia: Alzheimer's, frontotemporal, vascular, Lewy body, Parkinson's disease. Alzheimer's disease is what we always think of. You can't remember how you got from point A to point B, people take advantage of you, can't come up with information, that sort of thing. Frontotemporal dementia is probably not in anyone your age. Frontotemporal dementia is a disease of younger people, maybe 40s, 50s, 60s, and they lose that front part of the brain we were talking about, higher level thinking. They lose that at a young age just from some disease process. And the key hallmark there is your personality really changes. These people tend to be very nice, pleasant people before, and they get angry, irritable, just rougher people at a younger age. Then there's vascular dementia. That one is most common in people with cardiovascular risk factors, hypertension, high lipids, cholesterol, that sort of thing. And it's basically, I like to think of it as mini strokes that keep happening in your brain. You keep throwing blood clots or something like that in your brain, and your brain slowly declines over time because it's not getting the blood it needs. Lewy body dementia is kind of on the Parkinson spectrum. You have changes in your movement, that sort of thing. Okay, impact of we talked about this a little bit earlier. Impact of brain diseases on daily life, general decline, loss of independence is a hallmark of it. You can't get from point A to point B without help. You can't manage your finances without help. You can't cook without help, that sort of thing. And then symptoms to watch out for. We talked about this a little earlier, but kind of more. Getting lost in familiar places. That is like the key thing for Alzheimer's disease. If you get lost in your own neighborhood and someone has to help you get home, that's something to look out for. Repetitive questioning, that's more if you're noticing it in someone else. If you feel like your spouse or a friend has asked you the same question 6 times, then that's something to look out for. Now, again, there's caveats with all this. Repetitive questioning can also be a factor of not being able to hear. The person asked the question and he didn't hear the answer, so he's gonna ask again. So there's always caveats. Odd or inappropriate behaviors, forgetfulness of recent events, repeated falls or loss of balance, personality changes like we talked about. If you're tending to become more angry, irritable, withdrawn from society, that's something to look out for. Decline in planning and organization, changes in hygiene. A lot of times with brain disease, we'll see people who haven't bathed in 3-4 months because they can't, or they don't remember that they didn't. Changes in language abilities, comprehension. Again, much more on all of this next week. This is just kind of a primer to that conversation. And now we're going to kind of get to the part of the talk which is specific suggestions, things you can do to keep yourself healthy and happy and away from these brain diseases and prevent that natural decline as much as possible. So I'm guessing a lot of you have already had some good information on this. So I wanted to ask you, what are some fun things that you guys do to maintain your health?
Exercise.
Exercise. What sort of exercise?
Walking.
Great. Yes?
I was going to say dance.
Dance. Great.
Ping pong.
I'm sorry, what?
Ping pong.
Ping pong. Fantastic. Yes?
I do yoga a couple times a week and do walking about 5 times a week, but one thing I do is try to remember people's names in my neighborhood, and you don't see them on a daily basis, so unless you live right next door, 2 houses away, you forget their names.
Yeah, that's a great one. We'll talk about that a little bit more. That kind of gets back to what we said about compensation and kind of attacking a problem from a different angle to remember things. And that's also going to get to, we'll talk, a lot of you guys talked about exercise, which is great, and we'll talk about that, but also keeping your brain sharp with brain activities. So this is my plug for doctors. Regular doctor's visits are very important. We'll talk about, exercise, diet, all that sort of things. But if you have health conditions, seeing a doctor is very important. Diet and exercise are great for blood pressure, but if you have a type of blood pressure that's not able to be treated with diet and exercise alone, you need to be on some medications for your long-term health. And just to kind of belabor the point here, conditions that can affect the brain. High blood pressure can lead to stroke, heart problems that can end up leading to strokes. High hyperthyroidism or high hypothyroidism, meaning high or low thyroid problems, that can lead to problems such as depression, which can affect the brain. Diabetes can affect the brain. Lung problems, mental health, of course, and many, many more. So seeing a doctor frequently for these sort of things is important. This is, I should say, especially a problem in men. Women tend to like to go to the doctor a little bit more. Men have kind of this sense of bravado. No, I'm fine. I'm going okay. Maybe you guys have noticed this in your spouses or in yourself. So that's just my plug there. Now we'll talk about exercise. Regular exercise is very, very important. It leads to not only bodily effects, but improved cognitive function. Why does it do that? Well, exercise reduces insulin resistance. So as we get older, even if you're not diabetic, we all tend to get a little more resistance to insulin, which means your body isn't able to handle the sugar and the food as well. So this improves that. It reduces inflammatory cytokines in the brain. What that means is they're just molecules that are active in the brain that are kind of making it angry. It reduces that. It increases brain glucose metabolism, the ability of the brain to get rid of that glucose and use it for thinking or moving or whatever. It increases neuroplasticity, which means the ability to remodel or form new connections, that sort of thing. What exercises are best? And I'm going to give you a wishy-washy answer, is whatever you are able to do. The general rule here is to get your heart rate up as much as you can. If you are limited by bodily problems, if your knee hurts or your hip hurts or whatever, then do what you can. Okay? And we'll talk about different techniques to get around bodily problems. But the general rule is to get your heart rate up, get your blood pumping. And a word of caution here is to be careful and know your health limitations. If your knee hurts and you run a mile and you fall and you break a leg, that's not going to help anyone. So know your limitations and work within those. So examples of healthy activities. Walking a little faster than comfortable. We typically, when we think of exercise, we're like, okay, I'll go for a walk 2 miles. Push yourself a little bit. Push a little faster than comfortable, but still within your limits. Sports, tennis, badminton, pickleball, someone said ping pong, all fantastic things. Fun, and you're moving. I highlighted, or I bolded here, water aerobics and swimming for a couple of reasons. One, it's a fantastic whole body workout. Gets the core, gets the legs, gets the arms, gets your heart rate up, fantastic. Second thing, it is low contact. Meaning if you have a bad foot, a bad knee, a bad hip, swimming will not aggravate those. It is great for people with bodily problems. Excuse me. Swimming, unfortunately, is kind of harder to do. You need a facility. It's hard in the winter, that sort of thing. But I think swimming is one of the best exercises. More exercises, yoga, chair yoga if you're limited by your body. Chair yoga, there are videos on YouTube or in their classes where you can just do exercises, stretching while you're in a chair. Tai Chi is a great one. All these things help with the mind too, kind of calm your mind down, which helps with your brain, of course. And then light weights and body weight training, which is something I think is lacking in the elderly population. I would say this is especially important for women. The reason being, after menopause, you don't have estrogen, which is keeping your bones happy and strong, which is why women tend to be more affected by osteoporosis, bone problems. And the way to combat that is one, medications like we talked about, see your doctor. But the other thing is light weights. You're not gonna go and bench 500 pounds. Light weights, low weights, and repeated. So doing more repetitions of the same weight. That really helps with women and bone health, but it is applicable to everyone. The key point, again, is whatever you can, do it. Even if it's a little bit, it's good for you. If you can't convince yourself to walk 30 minutes, walk 10. I'm like that myself. I like to do the whole thing, or I don't like to do anything, and that's a bad trait. If whatever little you can do, given your circumstances, good. Now on the right here we have, it might be a little small, I apologize for that, but these are official guidelines on how much you should exercise and what you should do. I'll just read out loud. At least 150 minutes a week. That is for all adults in the US. 150 minutes of exercise, meaning getting your heart rate up a week. And at least 2 days a week of muscle strengthening activity. So like we said, lightweight exercise, yoga, tai chi, that sort of thing. And if you prefer vigorous aerobic activity, then you can do a little less than the 150 minutes. That'd be 75 minutes a week. But again, know your limitations and do something that's fun to you. If you like ping pong, do ping pong. But then at the bottom it says the same thing. If that's more than you can do right now, do what you can. Even 5 minutes of physical activity has real health benefits. And then this is kind of just more of the same. It says adults should do multi-component physical activities that includes balance training, so yoga, swimming, that sort of thing. They should know their physical activity level, and 150 minutes is the recommendation. So that's exercise. We kind of covered that. Any questions about exercise? Okay. Activities then. Cognitive stimulation is known to reduce risk of brain conditions. Your mind is like a muscle. You use it or you lose it. The more you use it, the better it's going to be. So challenge your mind in a way to keep it sharp. Again, wishy-washy answer here. There's no single activity that will stimulate the mind and make you perfect. But there are many good activities you can do. Reading is great. Trivia, Sudoku, crosswords, puzzles. I wrote puzzles twice, but just puzzles are good. Board games, computer and mobile games, crafts and hobbies, music, gardening, cooking, writing. But the point here is do something new or challenging for you. If you can cook a 5-course meal like it's nothing, and you've done it 500 times, you're probably not going to get much benefit from it the 501st time. Do something new to you. If you can do the Sunday crossword puzzle in 10 minutes, and you've been doing that for 50 years, you're not going to get much benefit. Do something new to you. So an example that I liked when I read it is first learning to drive. When you're first learning to drive, you're scared. It's very challenging. And now you don't even think about it. Now you can drive anywhere and you can be doing other things, listening to the radio, singing along, talking to someone. The next time you do it, you don't really get that brain stimulation, the benefit out of it. So new things will challenge your brain and force you to use it. Now diet. Oh, any questions about activity? Okay. Diet. Again, unfortunately with medicine, people kind of get angry about this. There's no magic bullet. It's all wishy-washy answers. So diet's the same, wishy-washy answers. The one diet that has been scientifically shown to help the most with many health problems is the Mediterranean diet. What it is whole grains, vegetables, fruits, legumes, nuts, seeds, fish, dairy, and poultry. What you don't see here is a lot of what we eat in a typical American diet. This has been shown to reduce blood pressure, weight, help with the mind, and many more things. Well, there's a slide coming up that kind of walks you through a little bit more what that is. Healthy fats instead of unhealthy ones. That's a good point. Nuts are great. You know, eating a Twinkie is not great. So healthy fats. And then red meats and sweets, which are staples of American diet, on rare occasions. Those things do not give you many health benefits. So those would be things to cut back. And again, no single food can stop brain aging, and you will sometimes see in the media, either for medications or exercises or whatever, that XYZ is revolutionary and it'll fix all your problems. It's a lie. Nothing will fix all your problems. It is consistent lifestyle changes and commitment to those changes that will help you the most. So follow healthy dietary patterns for long periods of times. There's no crash diet that you'll lose 50 pounds on and be perfect. You have to keep it up over time. This is talking about the Mediterranean or the DASH diet, which is another kind of offshoot a little bit more. So grains that are good: whole wheat bread, whole wheat pasta, English muffin, pita bread, bagel, unsalted pretzels, cereal, grains, oatmeal, brown rice, all great things. Vegetables: broccoli, carrots, collards, basically any vegetable is good. Fruits, also all good. Fat-free or low-fat dairy. So fat-free milk or fat-free buttermilk. Frozen yogurt if you need a substitute for ice cream. Cheese that is low in fat. Those are all good things. Now meat, select only lean meats. Chicken is good. Red meat, not so good. And then the way you cook it also matters. So broil it or roast it or poach it. Frying it is not a good thing. All sorts of nuts are good. And everything in moderation. You know, if you set unreasonable goals for yourself, like I'm never eating ice cream again, you're gonna fail. If you can cut back and say, okay, I really love ice cream and I eat it every day, but I wanna eat it 2 times a week. Set reasonable goals for yourself to achieve those. And then just a word on supplements and that sort of thing. Not everyone needs all supplements. Again, you'll hear in the media, you take this vitamin and it'll fix all your problems. Those things are always lies. It depends on your health conditions and lifestyle what supplements you need to take. So talk to your doctor about these if you have questions, but I will talk about kind of the more common ones that more people could benefit from. So the first one is vitamin B12. Vitamin B12 is typically found in meats, fish, eggs, dairy products, so animal products basically. Very important for making blood cells. Red blood cells, which is important for sending oxygen to your body, white blood cells, which fight off infection, that sort of thing. People who kind of adhere to vegan or vegetarian diets may be lacking in those, so it may be important for those people to take B12 supplements. Calcium, very important for bone health, I'm sure we all knew that. Especially important in women, like we talked about after menopause, the estrogen's not there, your bones are a little weaker. So those women may benefit more from calcium, but you know, bone health, like we talked about, is decreasing in everyone after a certain age. So many people could benefit. Talk to your doctor, they'll probably do a diet review about what specific things you're eating and if you're getting enough calcium as it is. So you may not need it if you're drinking 5 cups of milk a day. You may need it if you're not. Vitamin D is also important in bone health. I included this specifically because we live in Wisconsin, where in the winter we don't get enough sunlight. Vitamin D is linked to sunlight, so that may be something that many of us need to take. And there are many, many, many more vitamins and minerals that are important for you. I have a link, I think, at the end with an NIH website that kind of walks you through each of those, what they're found in, what they're important for, and if you may need to take them or not. So before we get into like the summary and wrapping this part of the presentation up, do we have any questions? Yes?
Instead of taking minutes of exercise per week, what about the number of steps like per day? Is there a recommendation for that?
Yeah, I'm not too sure. Yeah, so it used to be 10,000 steps a day, but the new research just came out, and then I read about that, and it's a well-done study. Now the health benefit comes from 7,000 steps, and it appears that with 7,000 steps, it's good enough, and then the benefits that you can get from 7,000 steps to 10,000 steps is pretty marginal. So as long as you can reach like 7,000 steps, I think it's you can harvest that cardio benefits from it.
Good question. Anyone else?
Elastics used
Yes.
You don't mention meditation.
Yes, and I should. That's a great point. Meditation, I'm a huge proponent of it. Calms the mind, makes the mind happier, kind of allows you to shut out the noise in the universe. It is linked, there are many studies linking it to better health outcomes overall, and I'm sure it helps with the mind as well, though I haven't seen any specific studies about that. Fantastic point. Anyone else? Okay, there will be plenty more opportunities for questions. Resources. I apologize, I didn't include a link, but there's the NIH-NIA, which is the National Institutes of Health / National Institute on Aging. They have fantastic information on diet, exercise, mental activities, that sort of things you can do, small things you can do to keep yourself healthy. If you Google NIH-NIA, you'll get to the main page for it, and that'll be your portal to everything else. The other thing is the NCOA, National Council on Aging. It is a group of medical professionals who get together and come up with specific recommendations for people who are elderly and things they can do. So I would highly recommend those two. I used those heavily when I made this presentation. So that is the end of this part of the presentation. We will field questions again, and then we will have the opportunity to look at live organs, and we have gloves, so you guys will be able to touch them if you so desire. That'll be kind of a more active teaching component of this. But one last time, any questions? Yes?
I've been joking my whole life about my short attention span. But now as the older I get, the more a problem this is, just not be able to sit down and do something for any amount of time. How can I start working against this at a late age?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yes, of course. She was saying that she struggled her life with short attention span, and she wanted specific recommendations for what she can do about that at this age. I would recommend things that force you to pay a little more attention, like puzzles or kind of those memory sort of games where you have to remember where the tiles are, that sort of thing. Really whatever makes you a little uncomfortable, like you may feel embarrassed or sad that you're a little bad at it, but whatever forces you to use whatever you're lacking will be what helps. Any other questions?
Do you have any suggestions on what we'll call rest or sleep as you age, what you should have or not have?
Yes, that's a great point. I think a lot of times we hear in the meeting, 8 hours, and you have to get 8 hours. And if you're not getting 8 hours, then it's not good. There is good data to show that that's not true. As you get older, and I'm sure many of you have experienced it, you tend to want to go to sleep a little earlier, tend to want to wake up a little earlier, maybe nap in the day. All natural things. As long as you are feeling well rested in the day and you are able to go about your daily activities without feeling like you're slogging, that sort of thing, that's good. If it's with 6 hours that you're achieving that, that's fantastic. There's no good data showing that more sleep will help you much more. It's whatever you can do to go about your day in a normal manner. And follow-up questions are recommended if that wasn't clear, of course. Yes?
Sometimes you mentioned seeing your doctor. When should a person switch from a regular family doctor to a geriatrics?
That's a good question. I would say, in my experience, family doctors and internal medicine doctors are well trained to deal with elderly people. Many of their visits in a normal day are with elderly people, so I would say you don't necessarily lack anything with those doctors. It may be a comfort thing for you, for a person who has specifically specialized in these things and may have more resources as you get older to connect you to exercise programs or neurocognitive testing. So I don't think, Tahi, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there's any specific recommendation. In medical training, they all get acquitted to and familiarized with older people.
I've had the same family doctor for 18 years, and he's getting to the point where he's probably going to retire. I hope he doesn't retire before I'm but he's been pretty good. I've tried, one thing I've done over the years is if I got a question, I'll send him a question, and he'll answer or give me a recommendation of who I should go to. And the last time I went in to talk to him, I was talking to him, he said, Leno said, my family doctor, he's only been practicing for a couple of years, said, I don't always agree with him. Sometimes I don't pay any attention to him. He'll learn. Yeah. So you just have to push, most of them, if they're good, and you ask them a question, they don't know, they'll tell you where to go.
Yep. It wasn't so much a question as advice, saying that doctors oftentimes, if you push them with what you need and what questions you have, then they'll answer you. So it was more advice saying, you know, kind of push us a little bit. Anyone else? Yes?
What about routine?
What are routines?
Yeah, like doing the same thing every day.
Sure. I would say that's more of a comfort thing. You know, if you're the sort of person who thrives on normalcy and doing the same thing every day, then yes, build something into your routine. If you're kind of more of a free spirit and you can handle a different routine every day, then that's the way to go about it. But if you've noticed like you can't stick to an exercise regimen or a diet without having it set in stone and going about it the same way every day, then yeah, know your limitations and set that routine. All right, yes?
What do you think about the memory screenings that they went to a doctor's office that, you know, draw a clock, you know, count backwards or say the alphabet? Do you think that those are really effective?
Yeah, that's a good question. So those sort of things, sorry, I'll repeat the question. The question was about what do I think and what do we think about the memory screenings you guys might have done in the doctor's office where, you know, they make you draw the clock and spell the world backwards and count down from 100, subtracting 7 each time, that sort of thing. Those things, I think doctors typically recommend them when they have some suspicion of something going on, or that just might be a screening thing. The thing about those, though, is they are screening. By definition, they're not a full comprehensive picture of everything. That's just a test, and if you score below a certain amount of the test, then that indicates to that doctor, like, okay, we need to work this up a little bit more. Then they'll probably send you to more in-depth cognitive testing. Take that with a grain of salt. Definitely, like if you don't know how to draw the clock or you mess it up, it comes into the full picture, and the doctors are well trained on how to go about that. If the score is below a certain amount, then that signals to them, yes, we need to look into it more. And if you just miss a couple of points and they don't mention it, then it's probably because you did well overall. Any other questions? Okay, well, we'll be around for a couple more. Well, almost an hour. And now we'll get to the organ demonstration part. These are provided generously from our anatomy department. These are people who have donated their bodies to science. So we try to reuse everything many times. So all these were part of our dissections when we were going through our training. And then they've preserved those and used them for outreach activities like this. So we have a bunch of organs. Unfortunately, we didn't have a diseased brain, or maybe fortunately, depending on how you look at it. But we will get into each of these.
What is this?
What color would these be normally?
Oh, about what you see.
Yeah. Really?
Yeah. We always have pretty pictures in the diagrams, but this is about what everything looks like in the body.
This doesn't match the encyclopedia
No.
I saw when I was a kid.
No.
This is long. Okay. It's also the second.
Yeah, okay. We will move this out of the way. So, okay, we'll start off with the brain. This is a brain. This is about the size you'd expect. Typically, we say, like, you put your two fists together and that's about the size of your brain. Kind of orienting you, if this is my brain, I'm facing this way. This is the front. This is the back. We talked about different parts of the brain, so working from the bottom up. This is your spinal cord, or kind of connecting to your brainstem. Yep, it connects to your spinal cord like that. This is kind of your entire nervous system. So everything you move, everything you think comes from the whole thing. So brainstem here, bottom, this is the base function, breathing, waking up, kind of the very basic animal activities we talked about. Yeah, sorry, it's very drippy.
Is it heavy?
I would say 3 pounds. Yeah, decently. Maybe a little more.
Did these all come from adults?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Then you have the cerebellum back here. Kind of this is rough. If you guys want to touch it, please feel free to come forward. But this is the balance part of your brain. So it helps coordinate movement and knows where your hands and feet are at any given moment in space. And then we get into the higher activities. So this is the frontal lobe. This is the highest level of thinking, problem solving, working through a math problem, that sort of thing is here. Then we have the parietal lobe kind of moving across here. This is language, sensation, movement, that sort of thing. And then back here you have the occipital lobe, which is kind of interesting if you think about it. Your eyes are in the front, and the signals go all the way to the back for your perception of the universe through your eyes. And then over here we have temporal lobes. And then I don't know if this is a split one, but in the middle you kind of have more, how would you describe it? Coordination type of things, like emotion and communication with the other side of the brain. That's all in the middle. It's very interesting. If you would like to come forward at any point, please come and touch these.
What's the covering that covers the brain?
Yes.
What's that called?
Yeah, the meninges.
Meninges?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I couldn't-
So if you have meningitis, that's what gets inflamed.
Yeah.
Itis in any medical term just means inflammation. So meningitis, inflammation of the meninges. Bronchitis, inflammation of the bronchi, which are in the lungs. That sort of thing.
Meningioma, which is a brain tumor.
Yes,
Homa. Typically the tumor or mass.
Yeah, okay, from those.
Yep.
Don't know.
Okay.
Just one more about the brain. What did they say that like, oh, your left brain or your right brain?
Yeah.
What does that mean? How does that happen?
Yeah, so left is left, right is right. So if this were facing forward, this is this person's left brain, this is the right brain. They do have somewhat different activities. It varies. Most of us in the world are left brain dominant, which is why most of us are right-handed. Even if you're left-handed though, interestingly, you are still often left brain dominant. But the dominant hemisphere of the brain, so left in, I'd say most of us sitting here, is important for language coordination, the motors that allow me to speak to you right now, and your ability to understand what I'm saying is that. The right side of the brain is more for talking to the other part, would you say? Yeah.
Just to add on that.
Yeah, please.
So for example, right here, so cerebellum is right here, so this is gonna be the left hemisphere, right hemisphere, and then about right here, this is where one of the language centers is located. It's called Vernicus Area. So let's say something happens and then the major arteries that goes to that supplies the blood to the this side of the brain blocks. So ischemic stroke. So stay tuned. We're going to talk about it next week. But that happens, and then somehow this particular area is kind of affected, and then someone. We talked about one of the stroke symptoms as like slurred speech, like facial droops. So slurred speech, that's because if this right here, if this brain area is affected, it's like, people tend to try to say something, but they just cannot say out loud. So we call it expressive aphasia, meaning the difficulty speaking. So you just cannot express it, but you can 100% understand what's going on. However, there's another language center right behind here. It's called Vernicus Area. So if this area is affected, you can speak, no problems. But then you're just basically you're saying gibberish. So it's completely out of meaning, or just can't understand it. It's very interesting. So depending on which brain area is affected by the stroke, you can tell that, oh yeah, it's coming from that particular area. So
You can't hear.
yeah.
You can't hear.
Speak loud.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, so depending on the brain regions, we can tell, depending on the presenting symptoms, we can tell, this specific brain area is affected. So that doctors and other providers can act on that, based on that.
I would highly recommend, we'll get to questions, If you have access to YouTube or videos at home, I would highly recommend Googling aphasia, A-P-H-A-S-I-A, and different types of that. And they'll give specific examples of real people who have these problems and what they sound and look like. We're gonna kind of work our way down the body. So we'll do lungs and then heart, or unless anyone has a strong preference. But here's the lung. This is actually very interesting in that it is a diseased lung. Can you guys see how it's a little blacker?
Yeah.
This is probably the lung of a smoker. This person's probably smoked over many years and developed kind of this disease as they went along. But so, okay, lung, this is his right lung, kind of oriented that way. In the middle, you can kind of see some vessels going into it, if you can. So that's how the air goes from your nose and your mouth down your lungs into here. And then as we can't really see it, but if we could follow one of these vessels, it'd branch and branch and branch and branch and branch millions of times until you get to the smallest air pocket, which is where it interacts with your vasculature. And that's how the oxygen gets from your lung into your blood. So that's kind of going there.
So is that a deflated lung?
Yes, yeah, yep. good question. And if, for those of you who want to feel it, it's actually quite interesting. It's hard in some places, probably a result of disease.
What do you have to keep this in to make these?
4 million years.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. All right, Tehi, you want to talk about the heart? Unless there are any questions about the lung? Okay.
So you can see right here is heart, and then it's cut in half.
Talk a little louder.
It's cut in half right here. You can see it's a broken. Yeah. So it's hard to see, like, left atrium and ventricles right here, but the way I can see here is that, so this is clearly the ventricle right here. So there's atrium. Atrium receives the blood from the other parts of the body. So once the blood blood gets into the heart, and then that goes from atrium to ventricles, and then it goes to, it leaves the heart and then goes outside of the body. So in between that, the old blood, which is deoxygenated, like lost old oxygens because they deliver the oxygen throughout the bodies, comes back to the heart, and then it gets reoxygenated from the lung, and then it goes out to the rest of the body. So that's where that kind of leaving of the heart happens at the ventricle right here. The way I can see it here is that, can you see that this is really muscular? Look at this. This is really thick right here. So it needs really good contractions so that, like, the blood can leave out of the body, and then it delivers a good amount of the blood throughout the bodies. So what happens if you get older or you have a heart attack, and somehow this muscle cannot get a good contraction? That's when you have this kind of heart failure symptoms, like you're not getting enough blood. Sometimes you get dizziness because your brain is not getting enough oxygen, things like this. So heart is very important. And then if you have any chest pain, sudden chest pain, I know we're all about brains, but if you have any heart pain, squeezing pain in the middle of the heart, yeah, don't wait. Just go to the emergency room and then get it checked.
Is that a typical size of a heart?
Yep.
Yep. Very interesting point. What do you guys think all those wires are coming out of it?
Oh, yeah.
Is that the vasculature for the heart?
Well, there is vasculature here. I specifically mean about these very man-made wires. Yeah. So this is a person who had, yeah. So I don't want to dig into it too much, but
What was that?
it's a pacemaker.
From a pacemaker.
So this person at some point probably has some arrhythmia that was leading to problems. Many people have arrhythmias, but they don't need pacemakers because it's benign or not really intrusive to their daily life. This person probably had some problem, maybe AFib or something like that, and they required a pacemaker to help coordinate how the heart goes. So that's very interesting about this heart.
What about a heart murmur?
Yeah, so a heart murmur, that's a very good point. A heart murmur is a result of abnormal flow in the heart, I would say. So typically as blood flows through the heart, you only hear, when we put our stethoscope on, you only hear two sounds, the lub and the dub, lub dub, lub dub, lub dub. And that's because that's the valves closing. So let's point out some valves. I don't know, this is gonna be kind of hard depending on your angle, but if you look kind of in this hole here, you can kind of see the valve. And that's what closes every time, causing one of the sounds. Now, if that valve doesn't close all the way, or it's like calcified and is unable to close, or it closes abnormally, then you can get a murmur because the blood is flowing where it should not be flowing. So if you kind of think about, blowing through a straw, if you pinch it a little bit, you might hear like an audible sound. That's what basically a heart murmur is. It's like some abnormal flow, and as the blood whooshes through there, you hear that murmur, whoosh, 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 something like that.
Is that considered heart life-threatening?
It depends. It really depends.
I've heard of people having operations on them,
Yep.
like with a big valve or something.
Yeah.
So this morning I was in the clinic, and then I heard one murmur. So it's a murmur because of the calcification of one of the major valves. It's called aortic valve. So I was clearly able to hear this murmur. So I talked to my attending doctor. He clearly has this murmur, and his answer was that so as long as it's asymptomatic, like having no symptoms like chest pain, shortness of breath, things like that, it's okay not to like really pursue into that. And then there's and then the intensity of the murmur is not always correlated with the severity of the disease progression. So, so talk to the doctor and then see what they think of it.
Yeah, there are some murmurs that will be benign, some murmurs that people have just because the way they're born, and some are severe, and it takes a little nuance and maybe some imaging to sort that out. And like Tehi was saying, symptoms are very important. I would wager that some of you guys have murmurs and don't even know about it, and it's never going to be a problem for you. So that's just the way it is. Great questions, by the way. Anyone else for the heart before we move on? All right. So working our way down, let's do liver.
You want to do?
Yeah, we're very lucky in that we have 2 livers. This is a healthy liver. See, it's smooth, pretty smooth looking. We have a gallbladder right here. It's kind of hard to distinguish, but it's a little floppier. And that's obviously artificial. But the liver is kind of, I think, a misunderstood organ in that a lot of people don't really know what it does. We think about liver in relation to alcohol pretty much only. And yes, liver is, damaged by alcohol, but the liver is immensely important. It is great for metabolism. It helps you keep your glucose where it needs to be. It helps take toxins out of your body. It basically is, in addition to the kidney, one of the major filters of the body. It is also very, very important in how you digest food. So the gallbladder here, does anyone know what the gallbladder does?
Stores bile.
Yes, perfect. So bile is basically this nasty substance that breaks down fat. It breaks down all the fatty stuff you eat. And so it's made in the liver, actually. It's stored in the gallbladder. And then when you eat like a cheeseburger or something, the gallbladder will contract to get rid of that substance, put it into your, your intestines and all that, and help break down that fat. Now that's you'd think that's interesting. What if you get your gallbladder removed? I can't eat any fatty stuff. Well, there's the caveat. Your liver is what makes it, right? So the gallbladder just stores the excess. So you can still eat fatty foods because your liver is still intact and still making the bile to break down the fatty foods. Okay, now we talked about alcohol. I don't know for sure that's what happened, but do you see how in comparison to this one, this is rough and nasty looking? This is a cirrhotic liver. You can see the nodules all around. So it's possible that this person, had an alcohol problem and that's what happened. Cirrhosis can be caused by many things though, so we can't really make assumptions. If for those of you who want to feel, you can come feel how much softer this is and how much harder this is.
It's hard to tell from now, but livers should be very soft.
Yeah.
But the cirrhotic livers, even without putting in a formalin, it's really, really hard.
Yeah, you could.
But right now it's hard to tell.
Yeah. So
it's a larger liver, and is that enlargement due to the cirrhosis?
Yeah, possibly. I think we think of cirrhosis as more like shrunken nodular liver. It's also possible that was just a bigger person.
I see.
Yeah, it's hard to say. It's not standardized. But good question.
So the liver is where it basically is detox center. So many of the, if you people say that, if I eat this, I can cleanse things, but any food is basically a toxin, in my opinion. So it has to go through the liver, and then somehow it gives some pressure on the liver. So that's why. So the reason why I'm mentioning is that liver is basically a detox kind of center, and there are many medications that can can put extra pressure on the liver. One thing that people kind of overlook, which is widely available, but somehow tend to overlook, is this Tylenol. So acetaminophen or Tylenol, everyone takes it, right? If there's a pain, headache, you just pop a pill of Tylenol. So Tylenol is a pain meds that everyone takes. However, this medication can actually put a lot of pressure on the liver, and the idea is that if you take more than 4,000 milligrams a day, you can actually cause liver toxicity. So just pay attention to how much you're taking in terms of Tylenol pills. So the high strength Tylenol is 500 milligrams per pill. So that means it's kind of safe to say that take no more than 6 pills a day within 24-hour period. And then the majority of the liver toxicity cases that presents to the emergency room is because of the Tylenol kind of toxicity. So it's everywhere, but it's not like 100% benign drugs. So.
Is that the same with Advil?
Advil is ibuprofen. It comes with different set of the problems, but it's different. Now we're talking about kidney problems, but then yeah, it's a different story.
A quick question about the gallbladder. I've heard of the problem with gallstones.
Yes.
What's the cause of those?
Gallstones, so the gallbladder is filled with bile. Bile is a component of it is cholesterol, and it can form kind of these little plaques, little balls. If you've ever seen them, they're very hard. And as the gallbladder squeezes, sometimes it can get stuck in the tube that goes from the gallbladder and the liver to the rest of your body. And if it gets stuck there, then the gallbladder can't squeeze and the liver can't drain into where it needs to drain. So,
is the occurrence of gallstones related to the quantity of bile one?
Not necessarily. Not quantity so much as quality, I would say.
I see.
More cholesterol, more, that sort of thing. So when we think of gallstone problems, we think of female people are more at risk, people who are around or after the age of 40, people who are obese, people with unhealthy diets. That puts you more at risk for gallstone problems. Great question, fantastic question. I apologize, we tried to go head to toe, but we completely forgot the esophagus here. So yeah, it's very interesting in that it's muscle. You don't really think of an esophagus as a muscle, I think, in common terms, but that's what it is. And when you eat, you control your mouth, but you don't control your esophagus. So food comes in here, you swallow, and then your body is just kind of primed and made in such a way that it's called peristalsis. So the contraction will just kind of like squeeze the food all the way down. If you think like you're wringing something out, it's kind of like that when you swallow. So very interesting organ as well.
With aging, isn't there some kind of noted decline in the esophagus?
Yeah, that's very true. It really depends, not everyone will experience that. It also depends on your risk factors. If you chew tobacco or you smoke, you're more likely to have strictures or something that would prevent food from going down. If you have terrible, terrible heartburn, then the acid comes back up into the esophagus and can change things there and form strictures or even cancer in some cases, that sort of thing. So yeah, anything that can go wrong with the body will go wrong in some people, and the esophagus is no exception to that. All right, so now we can get back on track. Spleen, you want to talk about it?
Yeah, so spleen right here. So this is where lots of immune function. So you've heard about I removed the spleen, right? So technically, people can live without spleen, but this is quite important because lots of the immune functions are happening inside of this spleen. So let's say if you don't have this for some reasons, like let's say you had a trauma. So
talk louder.
Even louder. Okay. All right. So let's say if you don't have this spleen right here, the problem is that your immune function is definitely declined. So you have to be more pay attention to the common organisms. Common organisms, things like an organism that can cause pneumonia. The organism can cause some of the flu symptoms. And you have to, so if you don't have spleen, it's a good idea to have vaccines for those common things. And also, there are certain conditions that can cause enlargement of the spleen. So for example, strep, or what do you say? The mono? Yeah, mono can cause enlargement of the spleen, and in that case, you have to pay extra attention because that can cause the rupture of the spleen, and then when that happens, typically you have to remove your spleens to control the bleeding and stuff. Anything that I missed?
I will mention a couple of things. One, number one cause of losing your spleen is getting into like a car accident or something. Spleen kind of sits on the left side in the front a little bit. So if you can imagine you hit something against it, spleen is very prone to rupture, whereas some of the other organs may not be. So that's one thing. And then I think one thing that I didn't really appreciate before I started learning this stuff more in depth is the body runs on vasculature. It's all piping. From head to toe, it's all piping. So we think about these things and how the veins drain from them into the heart, but it goes both ways. If your heart isn't working, it's not pumping, that blood has to go somewhere. It just backs up and backs up and backs up. So whereas the veins, their function is to take blood from the spleen and the liver to the heart, if it backs up, it just pools in the spleen and the liver, and those things get bigger, and that can hurt you. Physically, it can hurt you because it's so big, it's pushing against other things and causing problems. And as the blood backs up, you might hear people with heart failure get edema, swelling in their legs, terrible swelling, because that blood has nowhere to go, so it just pools somewhere. So I think that's a good point. We have here the world's smallest kidney. I don't know why it's so small. But kidney is another part of the filtration system along with the spleen. What happens is all the blood in your body needs to be filtered because you build up toxins as you eat and as you breathe, and that needs to go somewhere. So at any given moment, about 20-25% of the blood in the body is going through the kidney here. Comes in, it branches and branches and branches into like the smallest thing you can imagine, and it gets filtered across the membrane. And the body is very smart. It keeps what it needs to, and it gets rid of what it doesn't. So if you have, let's say, too much sodium in your body, the kidney here is going to get rid of a little bit more sodium. If you have too little, it's gonna hold on to it tight. Okay, and then it goes down here. This is leading to the bladder, which we don't have, and the bladder leads out. So it produces urine. Now, if you think about it, let's say on both sides we put a clamp here, or let's say you have one kidney and we put a clamp here. All the stuff that's supposed to be filtered is now backed up and backed up and backed up, and you get kidney failure because it's not able to do its job. It's not able to flow it all out properly.
How big would a typical intestine?
I would say just a little bit bigger. I don't know why it's so small. Maybe it's a younger person. We don't have all the information on these. Yeah. Any other questions about the kidney?
We can donate a kidney.
Yes. Yeah.
And be okay.
Yes. The body, again, is very smart. We are all here because of millions and millions of years of trial and failure. Yeah. So the body has built into itself redundancy, that if one kidney fails, at least you have another one to hold on to. So you can donate a kidney. And now an interesting point about donating a kidney, if you're the donor, you have one kidney left. If you're the recipient, they don't get rid of the kidney. They just add the third one. Yeah, so they'll actually just put it here, and if you ever see imaging of these people, they have 3 kidneys, or 4 if they have, more kidneys. Yeah.
Wow. But why don't they take the one out that's not used?
It has some function. It's not hurting anyone. Unless it's, cancer, then of course they'll take it out. But if it's just failure for whatever reason, the flow is not proper or whatever, they'll just leave it in. Less harm, The more you cut things, the more you rearrange things, the more prone you are to problems. So it's easier to just add something than add and subtract something.
Just to add on that, so you asked about what about Advil? So ibuprofen, it acts on kidney. So what it does is that when you take ibuprofen, yeah, of course, it somehow reduces your perception of pain, but it has some side effects. First of all, it can cause stomach ulcer and potentially cause the bleeding. So that's why, we used to put all the elderly patients with or without any cardiovascular problems on aspirin. Aspirin, similar to ibuprofen. The reason is that it acts on the formation of the blood clot, but right now, if you don't have any history of cardiovascular accidents, then we decided not to put on that because we have to also think about the risk and the benefit kind of a ratio. The risk is that you're going to have internal bleeding because of the ulcers and things like that. Also, what it does to the kidney is that it constricts or kind of narrows the arteries that goes into the kidney. So now kidney is receiving less blood. So now kidney is thinking that, okay, this guy has low kind of a overall body volume. So it receives that as dehydration. So the way kidney kind of compensate that is that try to hold on to more sodium. So by doing that, you're basically increasing lots of blood pressures. So, young athletes, they have lots of joint pains or something like that. Before going on a 5-mile run, pop on the ibuprofen, So you're exercising, you're already, in the condition of dehydration, and that also further causes kind of further put on lots of pressure on the kidney. So that's kind of bad combination. So my suggestion here is that whenever you take ibuprofen, aspirin, ibuprofen, Advil, things like that, try to drink enough water.
Do what? Try to what?
Water.
Drink plenty of water.
Oh, water.
Yep. Just don't take pop just a pill and then go to bed or anything.
Yeah.
Try to drink as much as water.
To add on to that a little bit, a point I never very much appreciated is the kidney is responsible for your blood pressure. Doesn't make sense, right? Kidney is responsible for how high your blood pressure is, but that's the way it is. It creates hormones and things that up the blood pressure, and when the blood pressure is too high, normally it gets rid of the water, it gets rid of the salt that's making your blood pressure high. Now we can talk about abnormal and when that goes wrong, but the point is the kidney is one of the major organs responsible for your blood pressure. All right.
I got one more question.
Please.
If you're going to take Tylenol or ibuprofen, which of the two do you suggest?
It's different. So ibuprofen, it acts directly on those molecules that can cause you a feeling that you're in pain. So it's just different, mechanism. So you try either of those, and then if it works, you just continue taking those. And then if it doesn't work, maybe you can switch to either Tylenol or ibuprofen, the other one. So Tylenol, it acts directly under the brain area where it just kind of numbs down the pain perception. Ibuprofen, it acts peripherally down here, kind of neutralizing those inflammatory molecules.
To add on to that, you have to take into account your own health problems. If your kidney is bad, then don't take the one that affects your kidney, that sort of thing, which would be ibuprofen. So there's no clear recommendation. You have to take everything into account. Okay, I think this is the last one we have, but this is the spinal cord. It's amazing. This thing controls your whole body, what you move, and it's less than the size of a dime in diameter. And how it works is you have this, it sits in your kind of in the back, in the vertebrae, and you have neurons going off of it everywhere to your body and controlling every single movement you can possibly think of. And when we get into problems is when you get a transection, if someone gets into a car accident and you nick a part of this, then you can't move everything. And since everything goes down, you can't move the things below it as well in some cases. And you kind of see how it's stringy down here. In Latin, it's called the cauda equina. It means horsetail, kind of looks like a horsetail. This is interesting because if you think about it, your spine only runs to the lower part of your back. It doesn't go down into your legs. So these fibers down here are the ones that kind of go into your lower body. They branch off, give off their own branches, and kind of help supply with the motor function and the sensory function to your lower extremities. So that's that. And again, like we said, this isn't the whole thing. Obviously, people are tall, not this short, but it would sit here. Okay, any questions?
What's the best way to improve your balance then when you get old?
Yeah.
Come to our stepping on no falls class.
Yoga is great. Chair yoga if you can't do that. If there's a medical reason for your imbalance, low blood pressure can cause that, then see your doctor and get those things under control. Strength is a big part of balance. If your legs are weak and you're hobbling, then you have to get your strength up. So light strengthening activities, weights, that sort of thing. Yes?
Do spicy foods affect anything in particular?
That's a good question. Spicy foods can give you the feeling that your reflux into your esophagus is a little bit worse. I faintly recall reading something that in the long term it doesn't really cause long-term problems. It just makes you feel a little bit worse. So it's more your tolerance, I believe, but I'm not 100% certain on that. It's a good question.
How big is the pancreas compared to some of these other organs?
Yeah, that's a great question. Pancreas, it's hard to, I would say, it's about this long up until my finger here, about like that. Pancreas is also a hard one to pull out. It's like a very crumbly organ almost.
Really?
Yeah. So it's hard to show it to you because as we try and take it out, it'll almost fall apart. Yeah, but great question. We'll be here for a little bit. If you would like to come touch things and ask questions, please do. If you'd like to just come up and talk to us, please do. But we thank you all for coming. And we, yeah.
Thank you. You want to start on that end?
Yeah, please.
We'll look forward to visiting with you next week.